Jennifer, we're thrilled that you made some time for us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's going to be a great conversation. Well, the first thing we want you to do is to take us back to early days. Imagine your senior year in high school, and you're, like all of us, imagining your future. How would you describe your vision for your life back then?
All right. Well, back then I was pretty obsessed with math. So I knew that going to college I was going to be a math major. And then there was one day that my mom had cut out an article, because that's what you did back then, from a newspaper about like the top jobs or something in America. And one of them was called an actuary. And, I didn't know what it was. Nobody really knew what it was in our pipeline. And so I looked it up, it was a lot to do with math and insurance and risk and probability. And so I was like, oh, that sounds fun. So that was kind of the decision I had made in high school, actually before college, that I was going to study to become an actuary. Yeah.
And you didn't necessarily think of yourself as an entrepreneur.
No, never crossed my mind,
just...
never heard the word. There was nothing like that in high school. So no, not at all at this point.
Okay, interesting. So first part of your career, that vision came true. You were an actuary. Tell us about that first job.
Yeah. So throughout college, so there's a bunch of exams required to become an actuary. And so out of college, I had the first two. I think there were 8 back then. They're always changing the system around. But so I had a couple internships. So in college, I interned at Mercer in Seattle. And then my second year, between my junior and senior year of college, I interned at Mercer in New York. So when I was graduating, I actually made a spreadsheet of all my offers.
Of course you did.
Yeah, of course. And so, you have to go through the process of like, oh, which company? And, this was LA, Chicago, New York. Like there were offers in different cities. And so it was more about the city and the company, And so I did my whole spreadsheet analysis. And the number one that came up, I was like, no. And I went with my number 2. Like sometimes you have to do the process in order to figure out what you really want. So I ended up in Chicago. So I moved to Chicago from the Seattle area and for my first job. And it was at a small kind of boutique actuarial firm. We worked mostly on large pension plans.
So for one of the things I feel like we're trying to do with Renegade is help people know the words that they might not know, because some of us come to entrepreneurship at different levels or points, and not all of us came from business backgrounds. So can you tell us what the difference between an actuary and an accountant is, or a CPA?
Sure. So accountant is probably what most people are used to. You're balancing books, you're reconciling bank accounts, logging things to the accounting system. It's a lot of pluses and minuses, not necessarily a lot of complex math. There's complex rules, but it's not complex math. Actuaries, you kind of put probability and statistics together with the time value of money. And so anything that is finance related, but then you have to put a value on it of some future event, that's what actuaries are doing. So if you think about insurance, it's like, okay, well, how do they calculate premiums? Mm-hmm. Well, you potentially, if you're a male, 25 years old, drive a red car, why are your premiums higher? Well, there's, backup data for that. And so they're analyzing all this data and then adding on the probability of some future event and then discounting that all to today to like produce a value. So that's kind of what actuaries do in all kinds of fields. So there's insurance, pension, there's a lot of actuarial work in sort of predicting out stock markets for like stock compensation plans and like what is the expense that we need to incur on our books for some of those plans that have future probability items in them.
All right. So bringing us back to that story part, now that we've kind of established what you were actually
Word
doing.
Of the day, actuary.
Yeah. So young actuary, living her life up in Chicago.
Yeah.
What then?
Okay. So there was a partner at my firm who was working on a project down in Jacksonville, Florida, of all places. And I was kind of working some on that client, but not really. But so we ended up going down there for a while, for a couple of years. And then that same partner who ended up kind of being my mentor, he left the firm and, happened to tell me, he wasn't exactly soliciting me, but he's like, oh, hey, I'm starting my own actuarial firm. And I said, ooh, can I come? So I think for me, maybe I always had the spirit of entrepreneur like in me, but I just needed that opportunity to kind of go there. And I probably still hadn't even used the word entrepreneur until later. But so I moved back up to Chicago where he was. And then we ended up having 5 people. And it was perfect because I was probably 26, 27. He was like mid 30s. So he would get all the clients and I would do the work. And I really do enjoy doing the work. Like I think probably I didn't end up, progressing through the ranks of the career because at some point you're like, oh, partner. And then like you never get to actually do anything. You're just managing people. And I was like, I don't know. I like to be in the weeds, So it was perfect because, he was like, oh, we're going to make all this money, get all these clients. And so it was great. Like I made way more than I had made, as an employee, because I had part of the business now. And after a while though, it was like 2 or 3 years, he decided that he wanted to be a stay-at-home dad and like not do the business anymore. But at that point, I had no network. Like I couldn't just go out and get clients like of that nature. And it was the same similar work, like pensions, stock comp, that type of stuff. So that's when I decided, I was like, well, I really liked this owning a business thing. So I'm going to go get my MBA. So that was kind of the next trajectory in the path.
And how did you pick U of L? You went to their entrepreneurial MBA?
Well, that was kind of separate. So I actually started at Kellogg at Northwestern. Okay. Yeah. So I was there for a year into like the 2-year MBA. And I was just going to do operations, finance. Like they didn't even have entrepreneurship still, even at this point. So I'm just getting my MBA, not because I necessarily wanted to start another business, but I felt like there were things that my partner did or didn't do that I didn't quite understand why or why not. So I was like, okay, I want to get my MBA to like, learn about business more. And, I'd always been in business, but not
You'd just
fully.
been doing the one thing,
right.
In the business.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So I was like, okay. So anyways, and then, the whole Kentucky, I know it's like, how'd Kentucky get into
Seattle,
this?
Chicago. Yeah, exactly.
At the time. So anyway, quit that startup because we kind of, dissolved it. I went to PwC, so Big Four accounting firm, working on the same type of stuff, pensions. And then met a guy there, coworker, and we ended up moving down to Kentucky because he got a job as basically at one of our clients. He's like, hey, want to move to Kentucky? And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, can I get a horse? I've always wanted one. So we did that. So
did you get the horse too?
I got a horse eventually, yes.
That totally checks out. Yeah.
And so I was still working at PwC, but now in the Louisville, Kentucky office, but same clients like up in Chicago. So kind of the first start of remote working. This was 2008 maybe. And so that's how I ended up in Kentucky. But then I had a decision to make of, okay, do I fly back up every week or whatever to try to finish this MBA? Or I just then started looking around the area. And so I stumbled upon the entrepreneurship MBA at U of L.
Can you transfer MBA programs?
Not really. So I had to start over. So it was half the money. And like Van Klaus, who I don't know if you remember him.
Yes,
So he was one of the professors in the program for people listening. They, did my interview or whatever on the phone, and they're like, yeah, we don't need you to take the GMAT again. Like, we don't really need to interview you. Like, you're already at Northwestern.
Yeah.
So just come on over.
You're in.
So yeah, I started over. And, it's still this bug of like entrepreneurship. Like, okay, yeah, like what's that about?
Because U of L was pretty an instrumental part of you launching your business.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, loved the program. I have nothing but good things to say about it.
It really introduced you to the entrepreneurship
all
concept.
Of it, just venture capital, going to, venture connectors where we had to write a paper about networking, all of that stuff.
It's just another way to start a business.
Yeah.
Is through education.
So one of the first semester classes was called Opportunity Discovery. And so this is where you basically keep a journal for the whole semester of all the business ideas that you have. And, a lot of the times when you're not an entrepreneur, you don't really have many, but once you have been an entrepreneur,
you can't
they
turn them
can't
off.
Stop. It is so true.
Yeah.
Like, gotta have my notepad next to my bed or my phone notes, and you're just like,
you can't help but see problems everywhere and simple solutions that could fix them.
It's so true. And like part of the class, I think, was training our brain to actually think about things in the world a different way. And once you have it, you literally cannot
one of
stop.
the things that drives me crazy
my
about
eyes
my
watering.
entrepreneurial brain now is that I experience running into businesses that I'm like, this could be done so much better.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And you're just like, let me at it. You just have this fantasy like, I could fix this thing. But
Yeah.
I think in brokering, I came to business brokering relatively young in my career. I had been around a lot of startups. And when I got to brokering, you have this concept of like businesses that do $5 million in revenue or $10 million in revenue. And you think these people know more than you. And then you start doing their business valuation or assessment and you're like, no one really knows what they're doing. They've just got here from tenacity and hard work, and it's not to discount it, but like I can't help but be like, oh, I can see all the different ways we could make this better.
Throughout that semester, I wrote stuff down. I think I had like 42 ideas, some of which came to fruition later. Like I'm going to tell you, Uber. One of my ideas in my journal was like, there needs to be a better taxi service. It sucks. Like you should be able to pay
Only
immediately.
someone who's in Chicago.
You should be able to. I don't even know what it was. But I was like, oh, this is Uber, definitely. But so then we had to present, in the final class, our top 2 ideas. So I literally have a little PowerPoint. It's like 3 slides of, I would like to make a stuffed animal that looks like my pet. And I had the name already. I don't know why, but I'm a big fan of alliteration. So Cuddle clones, made sense to me. I had bought the domain. I'm a big domain collector, even now. So that's what I presented to the class. And actually my second idea was also custom, but like shoes, where you could go into a store and there's like all the components. And so like you can snap them together. So like in the store, you just play around like, oh, I want this heel and it snaps on. And I want this little buckle and it snaps on. So like at the end of the little thing, you have a shoe and you bring it to the counter and then it gets manufactured. And
like
sent to
Build-A-Bear,
you.
sort of like Build-A-Bear.
Kind of, but you don't
shoes.
leave with the shoe.
Yeah.
Because that's just the model, but then it gets shipped to you at your size or whatever. We'll see if somebody wants to take that one on. But
well, the observation, it's funny because like when early entrepreneurs, a lot of times they're like really protective over their ideas. And it's like, the idea is a dime a dozen. Like it's doing it that is the hard part, right? Like, and so people who've done it, they're like, here's some ideas I have. Somebody want to take them?
Right.
Like, please do this. But one thing that's interesting is you came from being an actuary, and that's dealing a lot in like the digital world or information, like numbers, but not physical goods is what I'm getting at. And
no
a lot of your ideas were in the physical goods. So
I don't understand why, but yeah.
You loved animals. Like
That is one. Yeah. That's one thing.
So I think your love for animals became Cuddle clones. Now bring us kind of through to, you've decided that you're actually starting this business. Like, how did you go about first figuring out how to clone an animal?
Good question. So throughout then the classes in the MBA program, Cuddle Clones became our school project. So, we did all the academic exercises. So industry analysis, and, we were analyzing both the pet industry and then manufacturing as well. And we had ideas about how we were going to make it in the business plan, but that is not what actually happened. Like we thought we were going to print onto fabric, like the markings of an animal. And it's like, that really goes awry when there's a long-haired animal. Like you can't really print on long-haired things very well. Some kind of dye sublimation was like this idea that we had in our business plan. So toward the end, we actually were able to attend some business plan competitions. So where schools, think Shark Tank, but it was
called Idea State U.
Idea State U. We won that one.
I also competed in Idea State U, maybe at the same time in the undergrad program.
Okay. And so we were fortunate to have about $50K at the end of the MBA program to do something with to start the business. So at the time, I did have a co-founder. His name was Adam Green, and he was a marketing guy. So when we first got together to start the business, he was marketing, and then I was kind of finance operations, whatever else there was to do at that point. But we both looked at each other, and I was like, "Do you know how to make a stuffed animal?" "Nope." "Do you?" "Nope." "Okay, well, I guess we better figure that out." So we blew that $50K on consultants to get the product Right. And it took 2 years. So
Wow.
the story behind that. So yeah, that was like between 2011 and then we launched in 2013. So we went through kind of a plush consultant at first. Like he was more of a recruiter in the plush industry, but we found a lady and, she was, we were going to see if we could make these things in the US first. And we're laughed out of the room like, oh, plush left the US in the 1980s. Like it was some kind of trend. We're like, okay. So there's still, like textiles and stuff in like North Carolina, but there's no one like literally making plush toys. Like there was one company in Arizona, and then there was that teddy bear company, Vermont Teddy Bear or something, but not quite the big manufacturing. So ended up over in Asia through some consultants, and we would just get garbage prototypes. They were so bad. I mean, I've got the first couple still in my possession, and they should not see the light of day, but I could show them at some point.
What breed is that?
They'll be in a museum.
There was one that looked like a Beanie Baby. I mean, literally, but it cost us like $350 to make, and we're like, okay, that's not it. We just had in our mind what we wanted it to be. And so, the years go on, we're still practicing and making stuff. And so finally we got a company over in China to make one that we're like, okay, there's some potential here. The only problem was, so these factories over there, they've got a couple what's called sample makers on staff. And those are the people who can like bring something to life from a drawing or a picture or whatever. And then they've got, hundreds of employees that are just working the line, like making 5,000 units. Well, when we say, oh, we want to make minimum order quantity 1, they're like, no, like we don't do
Doesn't
that.
work.
Yeah. So there was nobody. So even though we had a few that we liked, this company did not want to be our manufacturing partner because it just wasn't the right business model for them. And so Adam, he will tell you that he would have probably given up at that point. Like, okay, cool, we tried. But I was like, well, okay, we just need to start our own workshop in China.
I love this. It's like, you're like, all right, well, if you won't do it, then I will.
Yeah. That sounds easy.
Exactly.
Start up a plush workshop in China.
So we decided to, so we had one guy, his name was Jimmy, on the ground there with us, and he worked for us for the whole time, I think until like maybe a couple of years ago, so even after the exit. And so we knew we needed these sample maker people, and we called them designers, like they were our designers. And so we found some. So I flew to China, and I stayed for about a month, maybe 6 weeks, I can't remember. We had this little apartment, and then we were able to kind of get the corner office of some bigger manufacturing facility. And then I remember the day, like I did a little PowerPoint, and I'm doing this in English and Jimmy's translating, and we had about 5 people in the room. So we had a couple designers, we had a sewing lady, and then we had Mo, who was our materials guy. And so in the beginning when we were practicing, so we had the few patterns. So that company was, we had paid for the samples that, we thought had potential. And so we had those patterns. And so we just gave them to this new team and like told them the goal. Like, here's the goal. It's not even like a hard goal. I mean, it's hard to execute, but it's not hard to understand the goal.
Right.
Like, we want this to look like that.
This, yeah.
And in my mind, it was like I wanted it to be accurate, but also have like a bit of a soul. And I think that we accomplished that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we just got to work on like our friends' pets and whatever. And so
How are you funding this at this point?
So I still had my full-time job at PwC. So I was self-funding it, and so was Adam. So we were both putting in
So you hadn't
capital.
taken any any
No.
investment, even when you decided like, hey, I'm going to start a thing in China. You were like, you know what, we'll just.
So there was a seed round toward the end of this experimenting, and I'm sure like once we decided to start our own workshop is probably when we started.
Okay.
So our seed round was $300K, and this sounds so low. The pre-money was 700. So post was $1 million. And so this is, we were pre-revenue, but we kind of had an idea. So that 300K helped us start the workshop and then build the website, basically. But we still did not take salaries until 3 years later.
Okay.
So
your journey was really long. Most people would have given up, right? Like if you went from your MBA program to a couple of years of just like it being the side thing that you were working on.
Prototyping, ugly prototypes.
yeah.
Yeah. And then
literally ugly. Yeah.
finally decided to raise the money. Now, if I remember correctly, because we've been in and out of each other's lives at different points, raising money for a physical good company that is one individual thing wasn't necessarily considered quote unquote scalable, like in the startup world, right? Did you had to convince people for that money? It's not easy for anyone to raise money, but there's not a lot of like retail consumer good product companies in this region, and you kind of paved that path. Can you talk a little bit about that like fundraising finance part of the business?
Yeah. And I mean, I think now I can actually talk way better about like finance. Like I still feel like then I was still green. So we mostly, actually, they were all angels for us. So we didn't have any institutional money in that round. The very first guy who said yes was a guy, I had helped his wife on her nonprofit, but he had been at a Venture Connectors and knew me. He was also a judge at one of the competitions called Ballard Morton at U of L. And so he was kind of our first yes. And it was $60K out of the 300. And so we were
awesome.
we were like totally
Do you remember what
excited.
made him say yes?
Just really us. He just liked Adam and I.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it is about.
And that's what
when
angels
you're
are in for.
pre-seed.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
angels should really understand that. You know, a lot of times they're like, they want to do all this due diligence. It's like, dude, this is a gut.
This is a shot in the dark.
It totally is. And you can't just do one and have it fail. You need
Go
to
put
do
your
10.
money in the stock market if you need a little more peace
you need
of
to do a
mind.
bunch of different ones. So, and then it was funny. I had an ex-boyfriend invest along with his parents. My parents put in a little bit.
Truly friends and family. Yeah.
It really was friends and family that we cobbled together. So I wouldn't even say I got necessarily the look into Kentucky-based, VCs at that point.
Okay. How much did you all end up raising in total over the
So
course?
that 300 got us to about 10 million in revenue.
That's
And
amazing.
we raised 1.2 later, like actually right before we sold, because we were, we pitched it as kind of like, hey, we're actually going to sell the business. So this might be like a quick return for you. But if we don't, we need this capital to do what we're going to do if the sale doesn't go through.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was good. We did have a loan, an SBA loan in the middle of all that for $500K. That we
Okay.
had paid off.
So you used a kind of combination of things. And once you have revenue, bank financing becomes possible.
Bank financing does. And we weren't even necessarily that profitable when we got the SBA loan. But yeah, we had like
As long
actual
as there's cash-
financials,
as long as there's
actual
cash
pro
flow, yeah,
formas.
yeah.
Yeah, cash flow definitely.
Revenue.
And our business model was nice because, and we'll probably get to this at some point in the story, but we went viral at one point, and for custom products, we're able to charge people up front. We don't have to wait till the product ships. So we can kind of get that cash in the door and then deploy it on other stuff.
So you mentioned the acquisition. That was in 22.
Late 21, November.
21, late
yeah,
21.
November. I was in Mexico City the day that we signed because it took too long and I had already had a vacation.
You're like, you have to come here.
So,
So tell us a little bit about some of the hiccups that acquisition presented for you.
yeah. So we had grown the business over the years to about 13 million in revenue. And so when so Adam and I, I had the title of CEO and he was chief marketing officer, but I feel like in our 10 years together, we were more like co-CEOs. Like we didn't really we made every large decision together. I never was like, this is my business. It wasn't like that. But I think we were lucky that we never really had a huge disagreement over like the future until late 2020. COVID was actually decent for us. People still love their pets and they're getting a lot of pets in COVID too. But we also ended up making masks with your pet on it. So that was very nice. So yeah, we didn't have a problem there, but I had visions of, becoming more of a pet company and going into adjacent some adjacent, some not so much things in the pet industry, just to give pet owners, because we had a big following. And he was, more of the opinion that we were going to, kind of cannibalize our core offering. We were going to mess it up. We need to focus. And so we both kind of presented to our other sort of exec team. And I said, well, I need everybody to vote 3-1 in order to do my vision, because it's a bigger one. I can't have a tie and then be like, oh, we're doing this. So I lost, actually. But we decided that the first level of strategy was to try to sell, because it was a good time. Actually, looking back, it was a fantastic time to sell an e-com business, because it has since gotten so competitive, marketing, e-commerce marketing, social media marketing.
Yeah. Everything's more
with
expensive.
CPMs. There's more companies out there. So it was actually a great time.
I want to back up really quickly, though, because I think that it's really interesting that you took that moment as a leader to say, like, I'm choosing the path of more risk, so I want everyone to vote. It had to be not unanimous, but it needed to be like overwhelming yes, or else it was a no.
Unanimous except for
win.
Adam.
Yeah, yeah,
And he said if it was that, he would get on board.
yeah. And you were okay with being outvoted, and so I think that was it probably sucked a little bit. Like, how did that feel in that moment? Because you had this big vision, right?
Yeah. Well, in that moment, I kind of knew, I'm like, okay, well, if we're just going to continue the status quo, I think I can step out and go do something else.
Yeah.
So I think that was kind of
you
the
had
plan.
the itch. You're like, now, I have the entrepreneurial itch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
You
mean,
knew what
now
you
it sounds
wanted
like
out
I
of
was
it.
all happy and, very regal about all of it. But there were some moments where I was, doubting it all and bawling and whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm not a crier. Like, I've probably only cried 3 times in the past 10 years. But one of them was those. And one was when my baby Izzy died.
Yeah.
Okay, so then when we decided that we were going to try to sell, we didn't really know much about that. So we ended up hiring a broker. And I know it costs money, but we just decided we didn't have the network that brokers would have to do the outreach. You know? I mean, we could just be like, hey, on Facebook, our business is for sale, but.
Well, it's a private situation, and I think it is, the due diligence portion of it and all of it is like a lot of project management that some of the brokers can help manage, not only the intake of people, but also just all the items.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of items.
It's a lot of items. I mean, just the SIM alone, which is, for anyone listening, it's like the confidential information memorandum. It's basically a brochure for your business. I mean, it was 80 pages long. And they put that
gracious.
together
Man,
for us.
80 pages? Me and you were like, oh.
Well, and it's
thanks.
really funny because, you're supposed to keep it confidential. And but we were so unique that anybody could know what the business
Yeah. Yeah, it'd
was
be hard
by
to find.
Googling. Yeah. I mean, we had one competitor at the time. You could tell that it wasn't them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, plush, custom plush company for sale. It's like, all right. So, it's like any sales funnel. You email 200 people and you get maybe 80 that show some interest, and then maybe 20 that sign an NDA. And so we did get some interest. It was a lot longer than we thought it would be, because I think we started this process in January of 21.
And
It
when did
didn't
you close?
until November.
Okay.
That's very normal.
Yeah. I mean,
That
it
is
is now, but
extremely
the brokers
normal.
aren't going to tell you that. They're like, oh, yeah, 3-4 months.
Oh, yeah. I used a broker. I would be
9 to 12.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a year. It's a
Yeah.
year. I mean,
And so we had interest from a custom teddy bear company that, you go and build a bear at a workshop. That was
Not
one.
to drop any
I
names.
know. We didn't quite have, I'm not even sure how it would have fit into their business model, because theirs aren't even custom necessarily. The skins are already made.
Yeah.
And then you add the heart. I love the process, but I didn't quite know, okay, were they going to add
It would have just been
clones to their
online.
store? Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. So that was interesting. We had a company out of California who we liked the best, actually, who had a lot of sites like gifts.com and other sort of custom gift type things. And a lot of print on demand products, things like that. So we liked them. So when you get what's called letters of intent, a company will kind of write in and say, hey, we're interested. Most typically they'll give you a range of, low to high offering prices. And so we had a couple of those, and of course, when you're an entrepreneur, you're like, oh, my business is worth X. And they come in at like 0.2X. And you're like, oh,
Wah, wah.
this is not what I spent the last 10 years doing. So, we had, and at the time, our revenue was probably, I think it ended up at like 15 in 2021, but we weren't profitable. But it's not something we had decided to do. Like we could have been, but we really just deployed all our cash all the time to other things. So I want to say our EBITDA was somewhere around like 200K. I mean, it was there, but not
You just
what
kept,
you would
you
expect
kept
on a $15 million company.
kind of. Did you reinvest it like in R&D and some other things?
All kinds of stuff, and
Yeah.
mostly marketing. I mean, I wouldn't even say our unit economics were fantastic. I mean, marketing was getting more expensive.
Yeah, you were just pushing growth.
Yeah, I mean, it was 30-40% of our revenue. And
Yeah.
then you take another chunk off for COGS and you're not left with much.
Well, and if you don't know you're going to go into an acquisition and give yourself some runway to kind of get things
Right.
lean and mean,
Yeah.
you end up with that.
Yeah. So we were hoping that, the narrative was selling more on revenue multiple, than profit. Because we had gone like, 1, 3, 6, 12, 15. So it was a good trajectory, of anybody kind of looking at that. But, most companies, when they're valuing you, and especially if they're a public company that's huge, is going to be multiples of EBITDA. So I think the ranges were like anywhere from 1.5 to 7, but a lot of earnout. And so, they might give you 2 up front, and then to earn the other 4, you have to, reach all these profitability targets and stay around for 2 or 5 years, who knows what. So we were kind of in the like, these are okay. But then there was an introduction made to us to a guy in Louisville who was starting a company that was basically going to be an e-commerce roll-up of like acquiring a bunch of e-commerce companies and then using AI to really boost their profitability. And so that was the idea. So we were introduced to them, and they came in with an offer of $10 million. And we're like, that sounds better than these things,
Nice.
and there
better
was
than that 0.2.
yeah. And so at the end, we picked them. Now, so this is going to be retrospective here, but I'm very glad we did what we did because we ended up, so the offer was something like 4 up front, 4 that came in like over the next 3 years, and then 2 based on like royalties of revenue. So it was some kind of structure like that. And that actually had like a huge bonus for Adam and I after like 1 year. Well, we decided, and I don't even know why, maybe this was a hunch, but that we wanted more up front. So we ended up negotiating, we dropped our bonuses like big time and then went to 6 at close, 3 a year later, and then 1 in royalties, something like that. So on the closing day, which was, November of 21 somewhere, it was kind of like a marriage because like the parties were all on the phone and like, do you, Jennifer, accept the terms of this offer? And I was like, I do. And then, to the other guy, do you accept it? And he did. So that was a fun day. I mean, it's very surreal. You like kind of wait for the wire to go into your account. You're like, ooh, yay. Now,
Especially since you all weren't in the same physical location.
no, we weren't,
Passing
shaking
papers
hands or
around the
anything.
table. Yeah.
So, as part of the deal, so we all went to work for this new company. And I was just I think I did some business development stuff. I think their whole point was to kind of give us easy roles. It wasn't that they expected us to really run the business going forward. So it was just an easy role for us. So I was in some biz dev, looking at M&A opportunities for this company. And pretty early on, we started to just notice that it was kind of a shit show, this new company. And in about in about 6 months, they had hired, 50 people.
Wow.
And they had raised some money, blew through that. So then a month later, basically, when we were up to 50 or 60, they laid off half the staff. And so we started to see,
There's some cracks in that.
Yeah. And, at the time, we had gotten the 6 up front. Now, that second $3 million was an unsecured note. And so some advice out there, do not do that. Because what that means is that if there's any secured notes ahead of you, like a
They'll
bank.
go first.
They will get money first. And then an unsecured note just puts you with everybody else credit cards, other vendors, things like that. So we started to, kind of see the writing on the wall that, oh, these guys aren't going to make it. And so then they asked us to defer our payment. And
Oh, that's hard.
yeah, come that next November. And I mean, if we had said no, they would just have gone bankrupt earlier,
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, well, let's defer
Give
it
it a
and you're
shot.
going to pay more.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So what happened was at the end of 22, they stopped operations. And so what they ended up doing was, and they had a bank loan, and they ended up selling the couple businesses that they had acquired, including Cuddle Clones, to another company out of Ohio. And that was just enough to cover their bank debt, and there was nothing left.
So is Cuddle Clone still in operation?
Cuddle Clones is.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
so
wasn't
that's
sure.
good.
Yeah, okay.
I'm on their
All right.
email list still.
Yeah,
that's good
So yeah,
news.
they're run out of Ohio. And they own, I think, maybe 12 different brands, like very different industries. But yeah, they just have like kind of, I think they tout themselves as kind of the resting place of e-com companies, yeah, we'll keep this running for
resting
you.
place.
Well, yeah, so it's permanent home. And then, the founders can go do other things.
Yeah.
So that's one good thing out of it. And so yeah, Adam and I never got those bonuses. We never got the second 3 million. And what happens too is typically, in our case anyway, we had a participating preferred type structure. So that early payment, it all went back to the preference.
Yeah,
So,
of the- yeah.
1.5 million to, whatever our total was. And then we shared with everybody on the pro rata. So my second payment was actually going to be more than my first payment. And so it was like,
Because you'd already paid everyone else kind
Yeah,
of
that's
their
right.
part. Yeah.
so it was
That
pretty,
was a salty part.
yeah, it was pretty salty. Like I was pretty angry.
Yeah. Sell a company for 10 million and
Only
And you only see, yeah. Now, I will say that 6, though, was really not tied to anything. So it was actually a better deal than those other ones that we had been considering. So in the way, it was like still the best decision.
still the best choice.
But, I had one investor say, oh, you've ruined my retirement. I'm like, this is not my fault, dude.
What?
Oh, yeah.
How
Like,
is
some nasty.
I'm sorry. You should not be an angel
You
of
should not be
investing.
angel investing your returement.
Yeah.
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 So
No.
that was a thing.
And how is it your fault that the other company failed?
I don't Unfortunate. Everybody, so we all had to find new jobs. I had enough to kind of save some for retirement, but I was of the opinion that I didn't really spend the first tranche as if I was not getting the second tranche. So I did all this stuff to like avoid tax. I rolled it over into some other C corps and investments and things. I made like a bunch of angel investments. And then like I had none left.
And they're like,
then I
crap,
didn't
now I
get the
have to
second
work
payment.
again.
Exactly. So I was like, oh, all right. So no. So now I have a full-time job and I'm actually doing a bunch of finance for some crypto startups.
Yeah.
So,
Do you, you went from being an employee to a part owner to creating a company, like literally creating something out of your brain, and then back to a job. So for me as a CEO, I feel like I like the way being a CEO feels. I like the coat, the sense of like I'm wearing a coat of a CEO. Do you miss the feel of being a CEO?
Oh, definitely. So I think I've skipped a year because between when we got laid off from the company that acquired us to me getting this full-time job, I actually did have a small startup studio is what I'll call it. Not a venture studio because we weren't venture backed, but we did get investment from Kentucky. And I had a couple more ideas, on my old list. So the idea was that, I'm going to get a couple employees. We're going to work on several ideas at once. We did one that totally failed. It was a text-based shopping thing where I would, send you a text and we'd already have your info. So I'd be like, oh, Maggie, do you want this widget? And then you just reply with a 1 and we ship you one. Like you don't even have to go to a website to check out. It's just like kind of like text. So it's like deal of the day type thing, but via text. That did work. I don't know if we were too early in the sense that people
I'm
aren't
like, that
comfortable
sounds like it
shopping.
would work.
Well, I thought so too. Well, we still have the text. So if anybody wants to, give me some money to market this thing, because it's a matter of convenience. It's like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I'll take one.
Yeah.
That's it. But we did thousands and thousands of tests and our metrics were so bad. I don't know if everybody's just getting too much spam. And we had a marketing like a cost of acquisition problem because we would spend money to get them to sign up, but then we'd have to send them that first text to say, okay, double opt in.
Yeah.
Half of those people
Didn't double opt in.
and we sent the text like immediately when they hit sign up. So you should expect a text.
That's weird.
So we had double CAC and then we still don't because you still haven't even bought anything. So now we've spent all this money to get you to sign up and then nobody would buy anything. It was crazy. So anyway, maybe it was just, I don't know. But so in the middle of that, I have the itch. Yes. To go back to your question. But we kind of ran through the couple $100K that we had raised. There's just not enough to really get a lot done. And then, so now I do have the itch. So my boss knows. I'm like, I want to build something. And he's like kind of starting to like do less time at his work. And I'm like, I've met you too late because they were all crypto startup dudes. I'm like, let's do a project. Let's build something. I don't care if it's crypto or whatever. Let's do it. So we're not quite there. So I do have other ideas. He knows that. So I'm just kind of half tinkering around on business plans, writing down notes. I have so many that I need to like focus and get them together. But there's several that I think still could be viable.
So something in your future.
We're
all waiting.
money
We want to see Jennifer
I would bet money on
go
that.
off on a rocket again.
Yeah. But I also enjoy the title and the working of it. And I kind of have, once you've started it and done a few businesses, you kind of know exactly what to do to get started and who your preferred vendors are for like everything from tax to legal to whatever, You
kind of have your people. Yeah. You kind of accumulate who you like working with over time.
Yeah.
And it is quicker to deploy those things. Also, I feel like the first acquisition that I did on the buy side, I spent all this time, energy on like due diligence before I should have been doing due diligence, right? Because I was inexperienced. I should have just gotten to the letter of intent and gotten through that. Now I go more quickly to like, let's nail out the hard things. And so just the experience of doing anything once makes the next times a lot easier.
Yeah.
So what do you think is, as you kind of look into the future now, we've kind of talked about some of your ideas. You're in actuary controller role within a crypto company. Can you kind of set some vision both for yourself and then kind of where you see like the world, within what you're allowed to like kind of talk about? You have a unique entrepreneurial background and crypto technology and physical. Can you kind of make some like, do you have any hot takes or predictions?
So one of the buzzwords, is the marrying now of AI and crypto. And so both buzzwords, in investing terms, like, if you just mention the word AI, you'll get a check, and that kind of has its ebbs and flows, but same with crypto. But, it's how to do a lot of the AI work, but in the background using cryptography and the blockchain, not like for, tracking of all that and whatever. So there's some ideas out there. I'm really trying to come up with an idea in crypto. I mean, I still think that people are building a bunch of infrastructure for each other and that there's not this, what they call retail case yet, where like, we got to get the masses on there and doing something, but there's just nothing for them to do quite yet. So I feel like that maybe will come in the future. I actually have this idea that we just need easy crypto statements. So if you think about logging into your bank, you can download a PDF of your statement. Well, crypto is kind of all over the place. If you're using one of the main exchanges like Coinbase, crypto.com, they have statements. But if you just have like a wallet that you control the custody of, and you just have to go to these what's called block explorers to see the history, it's all over the place. Sometimes you can see the balance, sometimes you can export some history, but there's no such thing as in like an actual statement. Like, I want a statement for this crypto address and I want it to be nice because, I know a guy who's going through a divorce and he needed to hand over to the attorneys, his statements of all his crypto wallets. So I did that for him, like manually, but I'm like, this should be a product. So that's one thing.
It's funny you said that because, kind of as we're wrapping up here, we were actually having a conversation in preparation for this one and talking about just the fact that like once you have the entrepreneurial bug, it doesn't actually matter what is. You can't help but just like see the opportunity.
You see a gap, you see something and you're like, I'm always telling my husband business ideas and he's like, you have the best ideas. But like, I don't have
But you just can't help
Yeah.
yourself. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's a stuffed animal or if it's like a statement on cryptocurrency. This is the same person. And the weavings of businesses are often the same, no matter what is the product or service or industry.
Business is business.
Yeah.
So I would love to still kind of run what I call a startup studio because I have so many. I probably also have adult ADHD of like hyperfixation for like a week, you know, on an idea, but like me focusing on one for the next 10, 20 years, you know, maybe that's not me. You know, actually, if you want a book recommendation, I just read one called On the Edge. It's about the people. So he has this thing called the river and the village and, you know, risk taking, like professional poker players, you know, sports gambling. Like there's a lot of gambling stuff in it, but it's also about venture capitalists. There's like a whole couple chapters on. And like the entrepreneurs are kind of on the fringe of that, but it's the VCs that are taking more risk about like collectively, like economically. And so it was like, well, maybe I should be a VC. But then I'm like, that sounds kind of boring because I like being an operator.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
We'll see. Well, I can't wait to see. Maggie, do you have anything else as we kind of wrap up?
No, I don't. I think it's just been great. I love that you are so open to so many, like you had such a diversity of experiences and they all translate. And I think that that's important. I think that's something I had to learn was if you know business, you know business and you can apply it in lots of different ways and you can go out and explore. And I love that that's what you're doing.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We appreciate it and allowing other people to learn from you. And I can't wait to see what the next version, next business. Sign me up. I did sign up for tech stuff. So, you know, there's
Stuff by text.
stuff by text. Yes. But I'll sign up for the next one too.
My mom was our best customer. She loved it. But you
Target client.
Yeah, you can't, you know, base all your
It's the QVC market.
data on that. Yeah, kind of. But easier.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah, you're welcome.